practically all of the time, and that is to consistently buy an S&P 500 low-cost index fund. Keep buying it through thick and thin, and especially through thin.
Something Warren Buffett has consistently told people is about the S&P 500 and how people should be investing percentage of their income into these index funds for the long period of time, whether the market is at all-time highs or all-time lows. Keeping consistent and monthly payments into this index fund will allow you to generate returns for the long term. Now, often the problem is that there are so many different ETFs as well, and there are even variables of index funds to invest in. So in this video, we're going to be diving deep and unpacking different ETFs that you can invest in, and I've saved quite an interesting one for the end of the video. So when we're looking at different industries, specific countries, and just generally worldwide, so we're going to be having a look at different ETFs to invest in, as well as the S&P 500. Now, if you're like me and you want to compound your wealth for the long term, it's always good to start early. The best time you should have started investing was yesterday. That's because we want to take advantage of one time and compound interest. So it's good not to wait until you've made so much money to then start investing. It's good to do that on your journey to creating wealth. If we're just looking at the world and the way the world is moving, we can see that we're moving towards cleaner technology, and we're moving away from fossil fuels such as petrol. We're moving away from diesel as well, and we're just generally moving to a much cleaner economy. So countries are starting to deploy wind farms, starting to use different solar panels for energy. So this brings us on to our first ETF. It's the Clean Energy ETF by iShares. Now, to actually do research on these ETFs, what I'd recommend is going on to iShares to have a look at them, and you can actually purchase them individually on different brokers such as Trading 212. But for today's video, we're just going to be having a look at iShares and having a look at what they offer. So just head over onto Google and type in iShares. It should be the first one that comes up. Then, as we want to have a look at clean energy, we just want to type in ticker symbol INRG, and if we just press search, it should just pop up. Brilliant. So looking at this ETF, what does it offer and what does it provide? So essentially what this ETF invests in, it invests in clean energy production and provision of equipment and tech in both developed and emerging markets within the clean energy sector. Right now, this ETF is brilliant because it just focuses on clean energy and tech. It excludes companies which exceed the carbon threshold that is determined by the overall index, right? So you can be rest assured that when you're investing into this specific ETF, that there is a barrier to entry before any utility or company or certain technology can get involved into this ETF. Now, we can also have a look at past performance. Of course, past performance doesn't guarantee any future returns, but just having a look at past performance, we can see that it is quite volatile, this ETF. 2020 was its great year where it exceeded over 140% of return. Reason for this is because of interest rates. Back in 2020, we all know what happened, but interest rates were super low, and when interest rates are low, that means to borrow money is cheap. Okay, so companies were obviously borrowing money, and which would allow greater investment into specific sectors that are reliant on interest rates, such as utilities. Tech is a big one as well. So these are very sensitive to interest rates, these sectors. That's why we saw such big returns back in 2020. However, if we was to look at 2023, so last year, there was a negative return of 20%. If we was to look at interest rates last year, and even to this day, interest rates are still quite high, and because of that sensitivity, that's why we've seen typical negative returns. But if you was to look at it of a long-term time horizon and interest rates aside, and you was to look at where the world is potentially moving towards, it's moving towards a much more greener and cleaner energy future as we start to transition out of that fossil fuel period. Now, if we was to look at the companies that are within this ETF, there are just over 100 different companies which are located around the world. So we have some stocks in there from the US, China, as well as Denmark as well. Not only that, this ETF is rebalanced semi-annually. right? So we will see changes every 6 months or so. So the companies and the weighting that we see here will obviously change as the company value changes and the market changes, right? This is why ETFs can be seen as an advantage, because you don't have to go in and change these different companies. They're already automatically done for you. It's just important to take into consideration different fees and how that typically works, but we can get onto that in another video, of course. Now, cybercrime is meant to grow year on year as everything becomes much more digitalized online. We use the internet more and more, and we rely on it more and more every single day. So naturally, we're going to see much more crime happening online. Now, this ETF is great as it gives you exposure to cybersecurity and digital security in both developed as well as emerging markets. So if we was to have a look at this ETF on a long-term time horizon and factor in that cybercrime is obviously meant to grow year on year, could see great returns as well for this ETF. So it's definitely one of my favorites so far this year. Now, this ETF is a lot more consistent in regards to returns. This could obviously be because of the amount of spending that is going on right now with companies purchasing different softwares and solutions to obviously combat different cybersecurity and attacks. So if we was just to have a look at previous performance last year, this ETF yielded over 32% of return, which can be considered quite great considering the interest rate environment that we're currently was in last year and currently today, and the ETF has still performed pretty well. But one of my favorite ETFs so far this year is the Semiconductor ETF. Semiconductors are literally used in everything that we go through in our day-to-day, such as your phones, your laptops. Everything is used, and there's always controversy even within the news between US, China, Taiwan. It's all to do with semiconductors, right? Now, there's actually an ETF you can actually get involved in. It's called the SOX ETF. Again, it's still by iShares. So if we was just to have a look at what this ETF generally offers, it invests and it's exposed to large, small and mid-cap companies in developed and emerging markets. So similar to the INRG ETF that we just spoke about, you've still got that diversification globally, right? What I find is also most interesting about this ETF is that if we was to have a look at specific geographies and regions which the ETF is involved in, it's predominantly involved in the US and Taiwan, which is amazing, right? Taiwan is obviously a big leader within semiconductors, as well as the US as well with Nvidia. Right? Always tension, globally with politics and the economy between US, Taiwan and China, and it's all regarding semiconductors. So if we was just to have a little look at general returns that this ETF has made, it's made over 64% last year in regards to returns, which is, again, it's amazing. Now, again, these are still subject to interest rate changes and market changes, but if you wanted to get general exposure to the semiconductor industry and get exposure to different companies such as Nvidia, AMD, a lot of these stocks are really doing pretty well right now. Buying into an ETF will automatically get yourself involved in these larger companies, and similar to INRG, it's also rebalanced, so you won't have to go in and change different stocks as the market progresses. So guys, let me know in the comment section down below which ETF you found most valuable. Subscribe for new videos that will be coming out every week, and feel free to drop me a like as well.